Good evening and welcome to our cooking class. Tonight we are having a Mediterranean feast, so hopefully everybody can have a really good view of all of the good things I've got in front of me. I know that we have some dinner guests that will be joining us, but they evidently don't know that if you're not on time, you're late. So here we are, we're starting now, and if I interrupt myself and start waving at people and telling them to sit down, you'll know that our in-person cooking class dinner guests have arrived. But I do like to start on time, so let's get started. Tonight we're going to be making falafel, we're going to be making some tabbouleh, we're going to be making hummus, some tzatziki sauce, and I have a very special, well, I think it's pretty special. If you think eggplants are special, I think it's a pretty special surprise. I'm going to do a whole roasted eggplant, which is going to be great almost as a kind of condiment on top of some of the other stuff we have, and that's in the oven right now. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But we're going to get started with the falafel first. We're going to cook it last, but it does better if you let it sit after it's been made and it clings together a little bit better. In the recipe, if you've seen it, you'll see that I recommend, not just recommend, but you really won't get good results otherwise, raw chickpeas that you dried, like you buy from the store, and you soak them for at least 12 hours, preferably overnight, and you do not cook them. The reason why is cooked or canned chickpeas make it too sloppy. The mixture isn't grainy enough, and it doesn't have a very good texture, and it just kind of is just really sloppy and messy. But let me show you the consistency of these. These were dried chickpeas that have just been soaked. You can see they're still very firm, but you can squish them in your fingers. And that's exactly what you want because they're going to go right into the food processor. This is really easy to make. Well, okay, so the batter for falafel is really easy to make. The hard part comes when you have to fry it up, but we'll get there. It's not the worst thing in the world. I just don't do a whole lot of deep frying, so sometimes I'm a little, But just remember, don't make it with your canned chickpeas. Soak them overnight, if you remember. And there are some tricks to quick soaking chickpeas, but really what you want to do is try and remember to soak them the night before so you can use them the day after. So here we have our chickpeas. The next thing we're going to put in are some green onions. So these have been cut up a little bit, but not chopped up because they're going right into the food processor. So no worry there. That's why this is easy. It's all going in here and it gets mixed and chopped up all at once. I love this recipe for that reason. We're also going to put in 3 garlic cloves, nice big ones. Oh yeah. And we're also going to add a lot, about 2 cups of fresh parsley. This makes it taste really good, obviously, and it's also what gives falafel that beautiful, beautiful, bright green color. So this is a lot. This is about 2 bunches worth of parsley, and I might have to put that in there and blend it down just a little bit. In fact, that's what I'm going to do before we add anything else. So I'm just going to pulse it and try and get the bulk down a little bit. Let me pull that so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so now that that's all chopped up, I'm going to kind of poke down the rest and add the rest of our parsley, or at least most of the rest. That's an awful lot of parsley. I'm willing to follow the recipe. So the rest of our parsley, we're also going to add, of course, a little bit of salt, just about a teaspoon. We're also going to add some cumin. That's a very key spice for that. Hi, come on in, have a seat. That's okay. I was just explaining to everybody who's watching online, if you see me waving and saying hello to people, it's because my guests have showed up. So please sit wherever you like, and I've truly just gotten started, so you're right on time. We're starting the falafel, and I know that sometimes it's hard to see at the angle you are, but I should be right on the TV in front of you, so there's no such thing as a bad seat. See, I told you I'd have to do this. It's fine. So we've got chickpeas in here, we've got some parsley, we've got some garlic, some green onions, some salt, and I'm just about to add some cumin.
Can I ask you a quick question?
You may.
So my understanding is that in some of the, I would say, Mediterranean places, they don't use chickpeas, they use fava beans to make the falafel?
Depends on where you are. One of our guests has just asked me about using fava beans versus chickpeas. They're similar in that they both have a skin. If you are super, super picky about working with chickpeas, you can pop the skins off first. You have to do that with fava beans. Fava beans have a really soapy flavor if you don't pop the skins off. So it's a little bit more labor intensive. I think, and I'm not an expert, but I think that Egypt uses fava beans.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Israeli countries and Jordan and Iraqi countries use chickpeas. And I don't know whether that's a horticultural thing or a cultural thing or an agricultural thing. I don't think I've ever seen fava beans in a regular grocery store.
Well, you can find them like bagged, but you have to cook them, but I couldn't find them canned.
Yeah.
But I think not far from off of 22, I think there is a Holly market that I haven't ventured to, but I wanted to try.
Okay, so now I'm gonna have to make it with fava beans and chickpeas and see how it compares. This is awesome. I'm glad you asked. So we all learn something new every day. Fava beans versus chickpeas. I don't know. I'm Susanna, by the way. Hello.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. And you? Hey, Sue. Nice to meet you. Okay, so what did I just add? I added the cumin. I'm sorry, you asked me a question, and then I just go off into my little cooking happy land, and I forget where I am. So cumin, and then half a teaspoon of ground coriander, which doesn't have a super strong flavor, but it does have a very distinctive one. I am going to add a little bit of turmeric, because I like the slight bitter edge that it gives, and I also like the color. It's also a very good anti-inflammatory. If you work out a lot and you find your muscles or your joints sore, you can make tea out of turmeric. Either they make it in tea bags, or you can add a spoonful of turmeric to whatever tea you like to drink with some honey and some black pepper, because black pepper actually activates the qualities, the anti-inflammatory qualities of turmeric, and it really helps your muscles feel better faster. The more you know. And I am going to add a pinch of cayenne because I do like it a little bit spicy. Are you guys okay with spicy?
Yes.
Sweet. All right. So that's just about everything. Oh, no, it's not. I forgot the baking powder. We'll have very sad little patties of falafel. So 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. And that makes it nice and fluffy. And before you guys came in, I was explaining that when we use the chickpeas for this, we never use cooked or canned chickpeas because they're too mushy. You have to soak the dry ones and not cook them and then grind them up with everything. It has a much better texture. If you use canned or cooked chickpeas, it's super sloppy. So now I'm just going to turn it on and let it rip. Because that's a lot of stuff that all has to get kind of ground down. And I see it moving. So this I'm going to have to kind of poke around, because all the stuff on the bottom, this is beautiful. It's bright green, it smells wonderful, it's got all those spices and garlic and green onions, but it's very bulky. So I'm going to have to kind of poke down what's on the top and pull up what's on the bottom. But I still think it's probably easier than trying to chop everything up by hand. If you don't have a food processor and you like to cook plant-based, please get a food processor. It makes all the difference. Now we're kind of going. The other problem with this is it's kind of dry. Because the chickpeas are pretty dry, they're not cooked yet, they don't hold a lot of moisture. It doesn't mix in as well, but it's starting to. That's exactly what we want. Yes. So it's forming this little tornado in there, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. It is so vividly green. I love it. I love it. I love it. I cannot wait to cook it and eat it. All right. I think just a little bit more and we'll be good to go. Beautiful. This is a gourmet cooking method, by the way, slapping your food processor around. Totally. All right, so now we've got a good, pretty homogeneous mixture in there. We're going to need that in just a minute, so I'm going to set it to soak. But look at how beautiful and bright green this mixture is. So I'm going to take the blade out. And it's pretty cakey, but we're going to add one more thing to it. And this is why I like to make it at the same time that I'm making hummus. Hummus does require cooked or canned chickpeas. And what I like to do is save the liquid from it, and it's called aquafaba, and it's really thick. It's almost like egg white. And as a matter of fact, you can use it as an egg substitute in baking, and you can even whip it up and you make meringue out of it the same way you would use egg white. It's really bizarre and amazing and cool. And it does work because I did not believe it. And so I tried it and I was like, all right. So bean juice equals eggs if you're not using eggs. So I have here from the canned beans that we're going to be making the hummus out of, a little bit of that aquafaba. And I'm going to pour in about a half a cup. And that is going to help this mixture stick together. It's going to function a little bit like egg. So it's going to help the mixture stick together when we start actually frying it up. So I'm just mixing that in. So pretty. Hooray. I'm just kind of packing it in there so that it absorbs the moisture kind of from itself. Because the more it sits, the more moisture it'll give off. Okay? And then I'm going to put this in the fridge. And as it chills, it will get closer and closer together so that when we make our patties out of it, it'll actually hold together, and then we have our falafel. So I'm going to stick this back in the fridge. And we're going to move on to making our tabbouleh. So for the tabbouleh, I have 2 cups of quinoa. Okay, so let me stop myself here and say that tabbouleh is usually made with bulgur wheat. Bulgur wheat is a kind of cracked wheat. It's still a whole grain. It's still super good for you. But quinoa is even better because it has a really high protein content, which most grains don't. It's unique in that way. So I cooked this earlier and then I spread it out on a pan when it was still hot, so a lot of the steam would come out, and then tossed it with a little bit of oil so it didn't stick together quite so much, and then chilled it. And the more you chill it, the more separate your grains will be, which is what you want when you're making the tabbouleh. So that goes in the bowl. And then we're going to add, again, lots and lots of parsley. This salad, tabbouleh salad, is like a vitamin powerhouse. Parsley is super, super high in vitamin C. It also has tomatoes. It also has fresh lemon juice, and it's raw, except for the quinoa, which is cooked. Everything else that goes in here is raw. And so you're kind of gaining a lot more of the vitamins and minerals than you would if it were all cooked out. I would say, after you eat this, there is nothing a breath mint is going to do for you. I'm sorry, but every single thing we're eating except for the bread has a ton of garlic, and almost all of it is raw garlic, except for in the falafel. I'm fine with that. Hopefully you and your loved ones will be fine with that, but people will know what you've been eating after you eat this meal. I just wanted to give you that disclaimer. But the parsley helps. You know, parsley is good for freshening the breath, so there's that. It kind of balances out, maybe, not really. So lots and lots of parsley. This is about 2 bunches of minced parsley. And then we're going to add about 2 cups of chopped tomatoes. I like to slice them and then kind of scoop the seeds out. If you don't scoop the seeds out, it gets kind of wet and gross. So I usually just kind of flick the seeds out with the tip of a knife and then chop them up. So there's that. And then we've got about 4 green onions, and those have been sliced up. This is not going in a food processor, so we've got to slice it all up beforehand. Okay. We're going to add some fresh mint, and that's been all chopped up. Not too much. We don't want it to be minty fresh, but we want it to have a little bit of a mint flavor. And the juice of 2 lemons. So as I'm adding these, I'm going to start tossing it around a little bit so that the lemon juice gets evenly distributed. If you do not have one of these in your kitchen, you need one of these in your kitchen. This is one of the things I use almost every day. It is a citrus squasher. I'm sure there's a more technical name for it, but I just like calling it the citrus squasher. And it will get everything out of your citrus way better than you could do squeezing by hand. A citrus reamer, you know, one of those things that you kind of, this is a lot easier and a lot faster. So I'm going to start tossing all of this around, the lemon juice and mixing in the tomatoes and the parsley, just to start getting things worked out in here. It's such a pretty salad too. It's perfect for summertime when the tomatoes are starting to get ripe. These are backyard tomatoes, so I know that they're perfectly ripe and wonderful. Okay, so 2 lemons, lots of lemon juice. See, it gets it like completely squoze out. I love this thing. What's that?
There's Path and Beyond, here I come.
Yep. And they make different sizes too, which is nice. So we're going to toss some more of that lemon juice in there. And as I said, loads of garlic. So we've got 2 nice big cloves of garlic over here. And this is a garlic squisher. Sometimes I chop it by hand. Sometimes I use, my little, what is that darn thing? Yeah, it's a zester, but you can also use it for garlic. And I also have a little ceramic plate one that I use for ginger, and it also works pretty well for garlic. This is the fastest way though, and this is actually from IKEA. And it's completely stainless steel. It's super easy to wash, which is one of the reasons I love it. I'm just going to keep that out because we're going to be using it a lot. A lot. And the quinoa, when I cooked it, was cooked with plenty of salt in the water. And I don't want to salt it right now. I might salt it a little bit before we start eating it, just to make sure. I'll taste it after it's had a chance to sit and have the flavors blend together. But I don't want to over salt it, and I don't want to put any salt on it now, because if I do, it'll draw a lot of the moisture out of the parsley and the tomatoes and make the salad really wet, which is not what we want. So I'm going to hold off on salting it until we're ready to eat it. So once we have the lemon juice and the garlic, everything else, the last thing I'm going to put in is a little drizzle of olive oil. Oh, so pretty. Yeah, this whole meal is very brightly colored and pretty and delicious. And absolutely. I mean, I'm on camera right now, so you can take all the pictures you want. And if you try and make this at home and you get stuck on something, although it's pretty simple, you can always go to Facebook and find the video and take a look. And you guys are not on camera, so don't worry. All right. So here it is. And it's best if you let it sit for a little bit. So, yeah, it's not going to need much salt. It needs to sit, but it doesn't need a whole lot of salt. I'm going to cover it up a bit. And I'm going to throw this in the fridge, and that way it can kind of sit there and think about itself and its life and how it wants to be delicious, and by the time we get back to it, it will be. Okay. So the next thing we're going to make is the hummus, which I make during the summer. That's like what I eat for lunch almost every day. So I make hummus probably twice a week or something, and then just eat it with tortilla wraps or just with a spoon at midnight when I'm thinking about things, you know, as you do. But I'm going to rinse out our food processor because we need that. I'll be right back as soon as this is all cleaned out. Doesn't take long. Talk amongst yourselves as I get the food processor going. Beautiful. All right. So like I said, if you don't have a food processor at home, now's the time. So we've got this bag. Let me scoot all of my paperwork down here. Okay, so for hummus, you do use cooked or canned chickpeas because they are squishy and you want it to be squishy. If those of you on camera or watching online saw me do this before, I could barely get that soaked chickpea to squish between my fingers. These are very squishy, and that's fine. I have made hummus where I use canned chickpeas, but I simmer them, bring them to a boil with a little bit of baking soda, and then take them off the heat. If you do that, the skins will practically dissolve and you get a hummus that is super fluffy. It's very light and ethereal. I actually like a heartier hummus, and also I'm lazy, so I don't often do that. But if you like super, super fluffy hummus, that's how you get it. You just kind of bring canned chickpeas, drained and canned chickpeas, to a boil with just a pinch of baking soda, let it cool, drain it, and then make the hummus just like I'm making it right now. So there's that. And then, of course, more garlic and the juice of a lemon. See, comes in handy every time. And you'll notice that in a lot of these dishes, the same flavors are being repeated over and over and over, but in different quantities and just kind of in different proportions and things like that. And so it really does taste different every time. They all have similar qualities, but they taste different because of the way that they're made. So there's that. And then here's tahini. If you don't know what tahini is, it's sesame paste. It's made kind of like peanut butter, but with sesame seeds instead. So it's super oily and super flavorful. If you don't have tahini at home, you can, in fact, use a little bit of peanut butter if you're making hummus. The flavor is not quite the same, but it's not bad. But these days, tahini is pretty easy to find. I think you can find it at ShopRite if you look in the peanut butter section. Back in my day, it was a lot harder to find. So about a quarter cup of that. I'm not really measuring because hummus always tastes different to me. Even if I made the recipe the same way every single time, it would come out differently because the beans are always different. And sometimes they're cooked a little more than they were in the last can, or sometimes they're not cooked as much. And sometimes you just get a different ratio. Tahini tends to really stick to the bottom. The solids tend to stick to the bottom, and the kind of goopy oil comes to the top. So sometimes you have to scrape a little bit. Sometimes it's not quite the same. Who knows? I'm going to add a little bit of cumin. Just a dusting. When I make this at home, I will put a couple of Thai peppers in it because I like it super spicy, and it gets spicier as it sits over time. So by the time I scrape the last batch out of the Tupperware, it's like, woo, I'm awake. It's great. I love it. Here's our olive oil. I need to put a pinch of salt. And I like hummus because it comes together super quickly. So there's all of that. And so when we start, I'm going to do the same thing with this as I did with the falafel and just kind of pulse it until everything gets more or less mixed. Okay. And then I'm going to let it run. And as I let it run, I'm going to pour a really thin stream of olive oil in there. Right now, you can't really see it, but it's pretty chunky. As the olive oil gets in there and gets kind of whipped up and incorporated with the rest of the mixture, it'll get very smooth. And if you've taken the skins off or dissolved them with that baking soda trick, it'll get very, very fluffy. But so you can see it coming together and getting smoother and smoother. And for this, I am going to taste it and see if it needs more salt. Pretty soft. Perfect. This is one of those things, the more often you make it, the easier it'll be. I don't know if I could make it in my sleep or how well it would turn out if I did, but I could at least, get the ingredients together, I bet. Let me get a spoon for this. So I'm going to take the blade out first. Scrape it off. So there is our nice big bowl of hummus. And usually a can's worth of hummus lasts me by myself for lunch about 3 or 4 days. And it's economical because canned beans, like even the organic ones, are usually less than $1. And it's high in protein, good for you. All the garlic, raw garlic especially, is super good for your immune system, which is something all should be paying attention to right now. Always, but especially right now. Okay. So I'm going to set that out for later. I don't need that anymore, so get that out of the way. If anyone's ever wondering, I actually do this in my own kitchen. I just sit here and talk to myself the whole time. It's nice to have company while I do it, so that's new.
You can invite us anytime, as long as we can eat.
Yeah, you're gonna get to eat, totally. Yes, for sure. Okay, so we're gonna make the tzatziki sauce. And once that's made, we're gonna come back to our falafel, because then it's gonna be ready to cook. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna start heating up the oil now, because the tzatziki sauce comes together really quickly. So I'm gonna turn on the stove, and since we're frying, I'm setting it at about medium high. I'm using peanut oil to fry it in. Peanut oil has a really, really high smoke point, which means it won't burn as easily. Do not try and use olive oil or walnut oil or anything that you would use for salad dressing, because it will smoke and everything tastes awful. So peanut oil, canola oil, avocado oil, all of those have really high smoke points. And you're going to use quite a bit because it's deep fried. It's shallow fried, I guess. But I'm putting a good layer in there. And that's one of the other reasons why when I make falafel, I like to make it in kind of little flat patties instead of balls. For one thing, they hold together a little bit better. For another thing, they don't take as much oil to fry them in. So tzatziki sauce I make with cashew milk yogurt. It's really good. It has all of the live active cultures that regular yogurt has. A lot less of the fat, no sugar at all, and it tastes just like yogurt. So usually in the morning, I'll have this with a spoonful of fruit preserves and a handful of crushed walnuts and some flaxseed and a little bit of cinnamon. It's really good, and it's very filling too, and it tastes just like regular yogurt. So this is about a cup, I would say, and we have about a tablespoon or so of fresh dill, all chopped up. This is about half of an English cucumber. English cucumbers are a little bit crispier. Those are the super long, skinny ones. You usually see them individually wrapped in the grocery stores. I kind of cut them lengthwise, scoop out the seeds, and then cut them into little tiny pieces. You know what? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to switch that over because that bowl is not big enough. You have to adapt. So let's do this instead. If I try and mix it in this bowl, we're going to have a big mess on our hands. So I'm just going to move it over here. Okay. Again with the lemon juice. This thing just keeps coming in handy. This is a very refreshing sauce. It's also good on, like if you make not meat meatballs. I've made Greek meatballs using Impossible meat with this. It's so good. And also with the homemade pita or regular pita, because the homemade pita can be kind of a production. That's why it's already been made, because it takes a few hours for the rising process and everything. But it's still really good. So garlic, that plant-based yogurt, lemon juice, dill, the English cucumber chopped up, a pinch of salt. And this is going to be really good on the pita. It's going to be good on the falafel. And I think it will also be really good on the roasted eggplant. In the oven right now, I have a whole eggplant, and it's been poked multiple times with a nice sharp knife and put into a 400-degree oven. And it gets very, very soft and squishy, and you just cut it open and drizzle either a little bit of this or a little bit of tahini sauce, and I'll show you that when we're getting ready to put all this together. But this is one of my favorite sauces. It's very tangy and fresh and delicious. It's good on salad too. I've had it on salad, especially if you have kale that you've kind of messed up with your hands and some fresh tomatoes. This is really good. Also really good for you. So, beautiful. Set that out as well. Okay, so we're a little bit too hot. So I'm going to turn down the heat just a bit. I can tell by the way that it's steaming over there. So let's get the falafel going. And I'm going to tell you about the pita bread. The recipe is online, and those of you who are here have it right in front of you. It is a long process because it's a yeast bread, and that takes a while. But it's really worth it because it's very fluffy. When you see it, I think you'll be surprised. It does not look like grocery store pita bread. It's not very thin. It's super thick and fluffy. And it's cooked on a griddle, not in the oven. So it's got kind of a charred flavor to it almost. But it's really nice and thick so that when you break it in half, you've got lots of room to spread it open and then put all your fillings in there. I'm going to get a bowl of water, cold water, and keep that on hand because if your hands are wet, you're going to be able to make the patties a little bit easier with this falafel. So I'm taking, so it's a very wet dough. It's not really even a dough. It's very, very fragile, but once you slip it in there, it should work just fine. And it's hot. So once you get it in there, you don't want to disturb it too much. And just keep your hands wet, take a deep breath, and do your best. It's going to be okay. Even if it feels like it's falling apart, and it kind of does. So I'll show you, it's really fragile and wet, but just persevere. Do your best to keep it together and get it right into that oil. Hopefully without burning yourself. That would be a good thing. Try not to do that. And these are pretty big. But they're so green that they almost look fake. I love it. So I see it starting to brown really nicely on the bottom. So I'm just going to scoot it over to the side and flip it over. Same thing. I'm trying to disturb them as little as possible because I really want them to hold together. But they cook very quickly. And that's good, because that means you can get dinner or lunch on the table that much more quickly. I don't like to wait. Okay, so the first one needs a little bit more. There we go. So pretty. Yeah, it almost looks like you're frying up mint ice cream or something. It's kind of weird. Watch out for lemon seeds. I just found one in there. Sometimes that lemon squisher kind of lets some of the seeds escape, but it could be worse. Okay. All right. So I'm putting these on a rack over some paper towels. I don't want to put them directly on paper towels because then they'll steam up and get soggy. And we want nice, crisp falafels. Adjust the heat back up just a little bit. So when I put these in here, it started to cool off, and they're not cooking quite as quickly as they were before. So I just cranked the heat up a little tiny bit more. Wet hands, little scoop, make kind of a very delicate ball, and then smash it out with your hands like that. Tuck it in so it's more or less a circle. That's more like it. Beauty. Sometimes I wish I had a professional fryer because that way I could keep my eye on the temperature all the time. You just kind of have to, if you're pan frying things without a temperature or a thermometer in there, you just kind of have to go for it. If you like adventure, this is the way to go. Okay, and as these come out, I'm also just going to salt them a little bit. You can kind of see what I'm doing, but not really. Sorry about that. Now it's back up to a good heat. All right. Trying to coax this one around without tearing it. There we go. They're so pretty. I love food. I get excited, I'm sorry.
No, we were just saying we do too.
Oh, good. Yeah. All right. So I'm glad we chilled this, because if we tried to make these right out of the food processor, I think it would have been too wet. They're holding together really nicely, but I think the aquafaba from the canned beans and the fact that we let the mixture chill for a while is what's really making these do what they're supposed to do. So thank goodness for good recipes that tell us what to do. Unless it's baking. I just don't like following baking recipes. You can't improvise. You'll notice that when I do these classes, I hardly ever do dessert, because dessert is finicky and you have to really adhere to a recipe, and you can't, okay, I can't. I know that there are people who can. I am not good at improvising with baking, because then I end up with, especially plant-based. Like, I know how eggs work if I were going to use them, and butter and all the rest of that. The plant-based stuff, if you don't stick to it just so, even then, it's not my favorite. So there have been a couple of dessert recipes that I really like. There's a chocolate pudding recipe that I love, and fruit. And that's about it for me as far as desserts go. That's probably just as well. Out of everything that I miss, I thought it would be like cheese. It's not cheese, it's brownies and cookies and cake. Because I cannot yet make those very well plant-based. I know that there are people who can, and I look forward to hearing from those people and maybe learning from those people. But as for me, not my strong point. So I would rather just eat more savory food and not worry quite as much about the dessert. If I have to make sacrifices, dessert is the easier one for me to make. So far. If you see me hiding in a corner with like a package of Chips Ahoy, you can call me out, I promise. So these look beautiful. They look brightly colored. They look really crispy. And they look easy to work with. The little balls would not fit into our pita bread quite so nicely, I don't think. And these certainly will. Just a few more, and then we'll be ready to move on and eat. I know you guys are hungry. I am hungry, actually. I've been saving up for this. Okay, one more, and we'll be good to go. There we go. Now I'm covered in parsley and garlic. But our falafel are almost done. And the other good thing about this is I am sure that these are cooked all the way through. But if they're not, nobody's going to get sick. I say that all the time. I really love that about plant-based cooking. I'm not paranoid about the cutting board and the countertops and the interior of the food. There are some things where you have to be careful that it's fully cooked, and it might not taste as good, but it won't kill you the way that raw meat will, or raw eggs. So that's been kind of nice too, not to have to worry about that. So our falafel is just about done, which means we are almost ready to eat. I know that makes you happy. The bread is warming up back here, and then the last thing I'm going to do is pull out that eggplant that's been roasting really nicely in the oven for about an hour, 45 minutes or so. And it's going to be really squishy, I hope. I'm going to take that out now, as a matter of fact, so we can deal with it. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you can see the skin is really, really wrinkly, and it started to kind of collapse on itself. That's what we want. Let that sit there for a minute. Turn off my burner, because the falafels are done. And since this one fell apart, I feel like it's my duty to try it. Oh, man. If they weren't such a pain in the butt with the oil and everything, I would make these a lot more often. Because they're way better than the restaurant ones, I'm just saying.
Could you freeze them?
Yeah. That's what I should do. Have a big cooking day and just freeze them and have delicious falafel whenever I want it. Yes, it does freeze well. Thank you for asking. That's a good thing to know. So, did I put those tongs in there? I sure did. Got another one. So here is our, soft and squishy and caramelized eggplant. Just going to cut that in half. Skin and all. Oh, so soft and pretty on the inside. It's going to be wonderful. Okay. If you like eggplant, I adore eggplant. What I'm going to do is just mix up a really quick tahini and lemon and garlic sauce over here. So, some of that. Lemon, about half a lemon. My garlic squisher. It's such a thing as being too efficient. And the garlic. I'm just going to mix all this together. A pinch of salt with a fork. And I'm going to spread it on one half of this eggplant and kind of mash it in there with my fork. And on the other half, I encourage you guys to spread a little bit of that tzatziki sauce and try that. So here is our tahini garlic eggplant. On the other half will be tzatziki eggplant. So it's kind of like a deconstructed baba ganoush.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was trying to think of like what is it called?
Okay, so I will let you all do the honors on the other half of that. And let me get our beautiful, beautiful falafel on a plate here. You guys are going to be happy. I hope so. I made you wait long enough. Before I put these out, I want to show everybody at home how beautifully these cook up. They're nice and firm. And if you look at the color, the beautiful, beautiful bright green underneath the nice crispy parts on the top. And then, of course, we have our cast iron griddle pita bread right here. So I will show folks at home. See, it's very thick. It does not look at all like the grocery store kind, but it's very soft and fluffy. And because it's so thick, when you split it open, you can kind of work your fingers in there and open it up so that you can then stuff it with your falafel and tzatziki. And if you had salad at home, you could put a little salad in there and so forth. Don't wait. Come eat. There are plates up there. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just up here going, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, please let me eat.
This is such a treat.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. So we are going to eat. We actually finished a little bit ahead of schedule. That's good news because I have a lot of other things to do after I clean up tonight. But I am so glad that you joined us online, and I'm so glad that these ladies have joined us in person. We'll be having another cooking class 2 weeks from now, and I think we're going to do breakfast for dinner. So stay tuned for more information and recipes on that. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys for the cooking class either here or online in a couple of weeks. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And remember, you were created by love for love. So please go out and be love. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you so much. This is such a treat.
I'm so glad.